Good morning, options traders. Steve Gans here, along with Trader Cat this morning, and we're going to go through a little bit of chart analysis. It is January 12th, 2025. Trader Cat, you can't lay on the keyboard, though. That doesn't work. So anyhow, we're going to go through some charts here. All right, now that I got my pen, let's start doing a little marking up of our chart. So we can see we've had this big, long channel here that's been going for over a year now. Now, we're at the lower end of this channel right now. We're coming down and we're starting to push on the bottom of that channel here. Now, it's not out of the question. We've broken through the channel before and have gotten back into it. So it's not out of the question that we could do the same here, or we could simply just bounce right off the bottom of this channel where we are. But a couple things that are starting to look a little bit concerning. So in zooming in a little bit, we can see up here that we're starting a downtrend here, and we've made what has been lower highs 3 times and lower lows now 3 to 4 times. So many times that can signal a trend change. This week's going to be pretty critical. We're starting earnings announcements this week. And I should also say that one of the big reasons for this particular fairly large sell-off here a couple days ago was the announcement, the jobs report. And that jobs report, actually, that was here on Friday. And that jobs report came out better than expected. I had some of my friends call up asking, Steve, I don't get it. This thing came out better than expected. Why did the market sell off? The reason the market sells off is if it's better than expected, then that means that the Feds likely will not need to cut rates as much or as often, which means that we as consumers are going to have a higher interest rate on things we might buy, like cars and houses, etc., and credit card debt. So all of those things are going to slow us as consumers down a little bit. In addition to that, companies that are financing a good portion of their operation are going to pay higher interest rates on financing, which is going to cut the amount of money that they have in their bottom line, in their profits. So if interest rates stay higher, that overall isn't necessarily good for the market. Now, it has to be done sometimes to control inflation, which of course is what the Fed is all about, is trying to get a handle on that and trying to walk that tightrope, if you will, of keeping inflation away, but still keeping our economy moving forward. But again, looking at this, we're seeing this little bit of a downtrend here, little channel happening. We also have an increase in our volume and trading volume on that down day, which further gives me a little bit of pause. That tends to be also a little bit of a concerning factor when that happens. Now, I do want to show you something, though. If we look at this, let's just spin back here 2 years. So we've been in this upward channel for a year. If we spin back 2 years, we had the same thing here all through 2021, all through 2022, this massive uptrend. This channel that we were in, we did finally drop out of that channel, and we dropped down to another level of what would have been support in the market. But ultimately, that didn't hold either. But we can see we went through a year of sideways and downward chop, very volatile year. Let me just condense this a little bit here. But we can see that overall, we have these two channels that essentially are on the same trajectory side by side. And we can see what happens here when we drop out of the channel. We get into this craziness going back and forth, and then we start rallying back up, and then we finally break out to new highs, and then this overall channel and angle of the channel resumed again. Our big question right now is, are we going to drop out of this channel, or are we simply going to bounce off the bottom of it and continue higher? And again, we'll know a lot more about that as this week progresses and next week as we start to get some earnings reports. Let's take a look at another indicator here, which is the VIX, the volatility index. Is there fear in the market at this point? And if I zoom this in, yeah, there's a little fear here that came in on Friday. This is a real anomaly that occurred back in August, so I try to move that off my chart to get a little better picture because that was just a very odd occurrence that happened back then. But even we can see that volatility here. If I come in and put a channel on this, I mean, our volatility here is also starting to move up a bit. So that is an indication that, yeah, there's some fear coming in. There are people out there starting to buy insurance on their portfolios at this point. Now, I also like to take a look at the rut. So we'll come in, take a look at the rut, see what's happening there. Now, the rut is starting to drop out of its channel. And again, rut does this from time to time. Any index can do this from time to time. It can drop out the bottom of the channel here a little bit, but its drop is a little more pronounced than it has been in the past. Now, there is what I would consider to be kind of a support resistance area here that it has dropped into. So now I'm going to be looking to see, do we break that? If we break, that's going to be also another kind of telltale sign that, yeah, we might be in for some real choppy markets, some downward markets, etc. Then I'll come in and I'll look at the volatility on the rut, which is the RVX, which you got to make sure there's a number of different RVX symbols here. We want this one right here. And the rut volatility, again, taking that huge spike kind of out of the picture there. It's also up a bit, not hugely, but it is definitely, all right, Trader Cat, stay out of here. You can't stand on the keyboard. That doesn't, see, you screw everything up when you come in and dance on the keyboard. So we got to avoid that. Anyhow, here we are looking at the RVX, and it also is starting to make higher lows. It's right now staying in a pattern there. It hasn't broken out to new highs. The RVX hasn't. But again, the rut itself has broken down a little bit out of that existing channel. Those are some things that we definitely need to keep an eye on as we go into this week. We start to see what's happening on earnings reports. Banks largely start reporting this week. They're not the meat of what we need to hear and see, but they're going to be the start of the trend, if you will, as to whether or not companies are continuing to meet or exceed earnings, which of course is what we want to see in order to keep our markets in enough fashion. That concludes the weekend review of our markets. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Now, those of you that are part of the alert service, let's start taking a look there. We're down to just 4 positions open right now. Something I really want people to notice here is our markets have had some really wide swings. If we take a look at these trades, these butterflies are holding up really well in this choppy market. So those are the 2 flies that are open. Again, we have a pretty flat T0 line where our market's able to move quite a bit without really being impacted too much. This butterfly here, we actually picked up and moved down. This butterfly used to be much higher here. And because of volatility, I was able to take that entire fly off, move it back down, keep my risk to the downside the same, still have virtually no risk to the upside. So I've done a complete reset, or what I call in my deep dive class on butterflies, I call that a mulligan. I get a do-over. And usually you don't get a do-over when you're 24, 25 days in. You can have an opportunity to do that usually in the first maybe week or so of a butterfly trade. And what that means is the market blows out the bottom side and you're starting to look a little dicey, like this thing could start, dropping rather quickly. But because of the pickup in volatility, I have an opportunity, a rare opportunity to move that entire tent down, reset it. That's going to flatten my deltas. That's going to get me back here into kind of a flat zone so that the market can move maybe another 100 points to the downside with little impact, where if it moved 100 points to the downside here, it was going to start to have a much, come on, Trader Cat, stay out there. It was going to start to have a much larger impact. So that's the key there, is that when volatility picks up, I have more opportunities, more things I can change with these butterflies. Camera hog. So the other thing I wanted to take a look at here, I want to pull up the two trades that we closed out this week. So this particular trade was a butterfly trade. It had been doing quite well. Then when our market started selling off pretty hard, this thing started moving pretty quickly, and I ended up closing it for a small profit. It was definitely up higher profitability-wise. It was up to about $200 in profit or so. I did have an order setting out there to close this thing before Friday. Remember, Thursday, the markets were closed because of Jimmy Carter's funeral service. That trade would have closed out on Thursday. I'm convinced of it if our market was open. It wasn't. I knew it wasn't going to be open, though, but I still took that chance that we weren't going to have a massive move on Friday, and we did. But anyhow, I was still able to close that one out for a profit. So the other trade closed out here was this waste management trade. And this one I'm going to do a complete video on. I'm going to put it in the circle with this trade. So those of you that are members of the alert service, you'll be able to go through, and I'm going to literally walk through this entire trade, the opening of it, multiple adjustments here. So the key that we need to look at here is on these adjustments, this trade flipped from being a very bullish trade to, as the underlying showed to me, it was not in a bullish mode anymore. It broke down through some points of support. I flipped the trade to be a bearish trade. And then when it got down to a point where it was stabilizing, I flipped it to be a neutral trade. So I'm going to do a video that's going to show all these progressions of this trade and how I made the decision each step along the way that ultimately took this trade from about an $1,100 loss to about a $300 gain. Now, this is really critical that options traders understand how to morph and modify, adjust an options trade throughout its life. I urge everyone to make sure that they go in, and those of you that are part of the alert service, make sure that you go in and take a look at this. Anyone seeing this maybe on YouTube, if you're not part of the service and you want to know more about that service, I'll put a link in the description down below so that you can go check that out. It is a service where I share a host of trades. This is not day trading. These are longer term trades where I will open trades like butterflies, occasionally an earnings trade, something along those lines, and I manage them start to finish. I do a video at the time that I open the trade, explaining how and why I'm opening the trade that I am opening. And then each time I adjust the trade, I'll do a little video showing how and why I'm adjusting the trade. And then ultimately the order that I put out to close the trade. And in general, I'll have 3 to 5 trades open at any given time. And there will probably be maybe one new trade opened a week, maybe 1 or 2 trades that are managed during the course of the week. But none of this is anything that you have to be immediately on top of. The vast majority of these are orders that I put out there, and they might hit sometime during the day. They might not hit for a day or two. So it's not like I put something out and a trader has to instantly jump on it in most cases. In rare instances, earnings trades sometimes require sometimes require a little more attention, but I'll say that up front. If I'm doing an earnings trade that might require someone to be around the following morning when earnings are announced, I will say that up front so that people understand that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead. Trader Cat and I are going to wrap up the weekend update and review here, and apparently it's time for her pets. We'll talk to you later.